Everyone be sure to mute. Everyone other than Arik, be sure to mute so we don't get some inadvertent background noise, please. Okay, announcements, just couple of things. So we've talked about Zoom meetings versus hybrid versus in-person, and have received lots of different opinions about this. Current plan is that we're, in light of Minnesota and Wisconsin winter weather, we'll do Zoom only during the winter, start hybrid meetings in April, and spring, summer, and fall do some in-person only meetings, just to get back to that reality. That typically with hybrid meetings, the attendance, in-person attendance, has been quite small. Most people attend by Zoom. So anyway, we'll play with it during the coming year and see what happens. As far as upcoming schedule, this Wednesday, December 7th, this coming Wednesday, December 7th, we'll have the usual 6:30 salon meeting. The assignment is action and the deadline is today. So there's still some time if you've got some images you want to share. And there will be no other meetings in December as usual in light of the holiday. And then we're working on programs for next year that we'll share as they show up. So that is that story. Questions about any of that? Arik, I just made you the host.
Yeah.
So do your thing. I can see your screen.
Yeah. Let me just. Okay, I'm just muting a couple of people who.
Thank you.
Okay. Ooh. Okay. Do you see my screen? So I guess now everybody's muted.
Yes, good to see your screen.
Okay. So good evening. Thank you for inviting me and attending tonight. So the program today is really, I combined two programs. One was on how to see things, how to create your own, what to pay attention to when you take pictures, when you look for subjects. I'm really with the idea that you don't go to exotic places and photograph exotic animals, exotic landscapes. And I'm saying it after I just came back from Yellowstone Glacier, Badlands, and a bunch of other places. But even during COVID, I've done a lot of work just locally in local parks. And it's really about what you create with what's around you. So I'll talk a little bit about visualization, the stages as we grow as photographers. And the second part is really about evaluating your photographs. It's not how to become a judge, although you would apply similar ideas and concepts, but just some tips about evaluating photographs. Since it's a relatively small crowd today, feel free to interrupt, ask questions, or comment at any time. Just temporarily unmute yourself and feel free to interrupt. It will make it more interesting for everybody. So I'll go into the program, and I'll start with, as I said, with the visualization, things to look for or consider when you want to make a photograph. And I'll really focus on making photographs rather than seeing something and taking photographs, just snapping it. And the 5 things that I think you really need to consider every time you take a picture are the thing, the subject itself, the subject, the details, vantage point, time, and frame, and I'll talk in more details about each one of these. So I'll start with the thing, with the subject. Every picture needs to have a subject. It can still be an abstract, but it needs to have something that will get the viewer attention, that will really draw the attention, will make it interesting. Yes, it could be intersecting lines, colors, meaning it could be an abstract. Doesn't have to be a storytelling picture, but it needs to have a subject. But the subject is only the start. You have to make the image unique and different. One of the books that I think if you have time to read, I strongly recommend it, is The Soul of the Camera by David Duchovny. It doesn't talk at all about cameras. It talks about you creating your art, about you creating images that are interesting, versus what he calls Me Too pictures, pictures that, you know, we all like, and especially in camera clubs, we all like to take the same, the old barn, the weathered barn, the rusty hinge on a door, moonrise, moonset, sunrise, sunset, or go to exotic places. Almost all my connections on Facebook are photographers, and you often see the same type of pictures based on the season. So make it unique, make it different. Look for something that will make it your picture. It's not just what's there, but what you do with it. So the subject is just the start, and you make an image using that subject, is what it represents. Take pictures about something, not a picture of something. Make sure you capture and reflect your own experience, point of view, and impression. So I know some photographers believe that taking the picture, it's about you. You know what? Let's be honest. The viewer doesn't care about you unless it's your relative or friend. It's about the picture. It's about the subject, but reflect your own view of it. Reflect your own impression. As you can see in there's still some unmuted. Okay. So as you can see, the pictures on the screen right now, you know, look for something that expresses something. So for example, the picture on the left, it was taken in Memphis. Yes, the mural is somebody else's art, but being on an old building at this point and a deserted.
He's fine. I got peas and poopers in the last 2 hours.
Okay, that's so nice.
Everybody, please mute.
I think. But if you also see the photographer standing there taking a picture of this big building, and you can get the conflict, the ratio of the small photographer taking a picture. I don't know that photographer, he happened to be there. The picture of the girl sitting there, I took at 1 a.m. I was actually doing a project on empty streets at night. I went to small towns and photographed from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. and for the most part empty streets, but this was next to a bar and it was the last Thursday of the summer break, so there were a lot of kids out there at 1 a.m. And the picture on the right, a foggy day with the light on the little pole. So all these pictures are actually real. I do use a lot of Photoshop and change pictures, but these are pretty straight. Well, with tonal adjustment and stuff. Look for something different in terms of the look of the place. I've seen this little island with the building a few times, but going there in a snowstorm really made it unique, made it moody. I actually used that picture on our holiday cards. Of course, the right light will make it unique, will make it different, and weather conditions will affect it. So examples where it's still about the subject. The subject is the main thing in the picture. It's actually the thing, but making it unique either in capture or in post-processing. This was taken in Minneapolis, and I was walking with the dog. This was 3 years ago. I was walking with the dog, and this woman, she was, I thought, sleeping on the sidewalk there. And then when I passed with the dog, she got up and said, "Can I pet your dog?" And just the interaction, she was so happy to have the dog there. And the dog was happy to get attention. The berries, I just put them in a pan, put it outside overnight. It was 20 degrees outside. In the morning, I just took that block of ice out of the pan and took some pictures. Looking for unique subjects, unique angles. And again, more examples where the subject, the thing, is the key element in the picture, but trying to get some unique image, either by using our visual tools, which are shutter speed, depth of field, so the aperture, the angle, the distance from the subject. So those are our tools to create our visual. The tones. Do I want the picture to be black and white? Do I want it to be warm tones? Do I want it to be cooler tones, overexposed, underexposed? Those are all our visual controls, our tools to make the picture our own. More examples of taking some different pictures that these are all taken, or most of them are taken not far from where I live. You just need to go out and look for something, how to make your own work with it. I love to do street photography. I travel all over to do street photography. And in my case, my preference is to engage with the subjects, not to do many candids, but mostly have a connection. I talk to them for a little bit, and then with permission, I take the pictures. I let them go back to what they're doing. So they all knew that I'm taking the pictures. We all talked before. And more examples of where you do something different with the subject, something more unique. Next is the details. And when we look at the details, we are looking at things, and that's where we as photographers, or as people who are trained to look at things and look at textures and patterns and curves and lines and colors, we can see things that other people don't pay attention to. It's kind of funny that if you consider all forms of art, photography is really the only one where most of our audience are other photographers. We're in camera clubs, we are on Facebook, and our friends are photographers. We are, or Instagram, whatever social media. We share a lot of our photography with other photographers. When you think about it, no other art form is handled that way. Authors don't write books for other authors. Musicians don't play the music to other musicians. It's really something unique about photography. But as photographers, we pay attention to those details. We're looking at those elements, and then elements that the eye doesn't see, like black and white or selective focus or motion blur. So we can use those again as our tools to create our unique images. We'll see examples. This is not about the hot air balloon. It's about the colors, about the pattern, about the textures, and same here. I actually conducted workshops in Longwood Gardens where people come there. Everybody has a camera or a cell phone with a camera. They all take pictures of the beautiful flowers. And I tell my attendees, look for something unique. It's not about the pretty flower. What are you going to do with that flower that makes it your own picture? This is just the edge of the petals on an orchid. It's not about the gerbera. It's about the intersection between the two flowers. It's about the textures. It's about the colors. I've done a lot of pictures in black and white. They're mostly abstracts. It's not about the leaves. It's about tones, patterns, textures. And again, those things, you don't have to travel to exotic places. You can get them in your house, in your backyard, or in a local park or garden. More examples of where the subject is not, yes, there is a subject. As I said, there must be a subject, but it's not about the tulip. It's not about the leaf. It's not about those two things here. It's about the tones, the intersection, and about curves, about really high key picture of a tulip before it actually got into full bloom. More where very mundane subjects became good targets for photography when you start looking at patterns, colors, lines, textures. Well, I love to work with slow shutter speeds. Yeah, the picture at the bottom just had the water flowing, and I did it in the fall. So the sun hits the trees across the river and reflects between the blue sky and the reflection of the leaves in the water. You get a mix of gold and blue. All three pictures are taken not at the same time, not even the same year, but pretty much in the same place that has these nice cascades, and the river is not that wide, so the light does reflect from the other side. More about textures, patterns, and colors. Even the picture at the bottom, it's not about the cow. It's about the use of, it's about the detail. Any questions? Okay, the vantage point. The next thing is the vantage point. And yes, it's easy to stand up straight and take a picture from your eye level, but that's what everybody else sees, and that's doesn't make it necessarily make it your unique thing. Of course, where you stand could also make the difference. So for example, the picture on the left, everybody takes the skyline of New York, and many people take pictures in Central Park. But I was looking for spots where I can really take some of the tall buildings through the landscape in Central Park in New York. The picture in the middle, I was on my knees. I took it in Barcelona. I saw this girl sitting and playing with her kitten, and she didn't speak English, but through hand gestures, I asked her if I can take a few pictures, and she agreed, and I took a bunch of pictures of her. And the picture on the right-hand side, there was only one spot where I could get the reflection of the Jesus Saves in the glass window on the left. I had to stand in the middle of the road, in the middle of the street. So you really want to look for vantage point that make it unique, make it yours, unusual angles, perspectives, and really don't be afraid to climb on something. I went on my trip and I took with me a step stool just so I can get a little bit higher than my regular eye level. I quite often, I'm on my knees or even lower than that. Animal, birds, people should be captured from their eye level for a natural look, so you don't want to take animals from above. This one, it's the vantage point that made it special. I actually sold that picture. I was in Norway, my wife and I were in Norway. I was driving on a narrow road and I saw that. And I said, wow, I have to stop. There was no place to stop. I went about half a mile until I found a place to stop. And then I just left my wife in the car, ran back and I took a bunch of these pictures. And as I was standing there, the wind was moving the boat and moving the clouds. So from the same spot, I got multiple pictures that are not the same. Also standing on a cliff, looking straight down on the shoreline. This was somewhere in California, Northern California. You saw this one. I took many pictures. I take many pictures standing in the middle of the road. In fact, I mentioned I just came back from a long road trip, 6 weeks, 11,000 miles. And every day I stopped in the middle of the road, at least a couple of times, and took pictures from the middle of the road with a wide angle lens for the most part, because it gave an idea as I was moving different states, different landscapes, even driving in a single state, but going from one area to another. Like Washington, the eastern part is desert with those small rolling hills. But as you go towards the west of Washington, the landscape changes completely. And it was really nice as I'm processing the pictures to see how the landscape changes from one place to another, but all taken from the middle of the road, with the road really seeing the landscape on the two sides of the road. More about vantage point. These are taken from low perspective. The flowers, back then I didn't have those cameras that, have the articulate screen. So I had to actually bend down and look through. This one, just so you see, it's a small cascade about a foot tall. The maple leaves here just give you some sense of scale of what, and I was in the snow, in the mud. It was not snow at the time. And here the vantage point made that little twig reflect to me like a woman on her back. The picture of the World Trade Center I took the week before September 11, before they crashed. I just went to B&H, got a new wide angle lens, and went to Jersey City just to try it. And I took lots of pictures, wide angle, and from Jersey City towards the World Trade Center. And the guy there, I was on my knees, shooting straight up. You can imagine, to get the goat nursing, my knees were in the poop. I mean, the goats are not that tall, and I'm eye level with the kid. With the cow, it was a little easier. And time, I judge a lot of competitions, and sometimes I think, oh, if you just waited a little longer, or if you just if you were able to take the picture a second earlier, could have made a big difference. But I'm not just talking about the instant, but sometimes it's the time of day, time of year, time based on the weather. So light, quality, color, angle, motion, action, those are all things related to time that you need to pay attention. You know, here it was the moment of exchanging the money that was important. So I go to the markets and I'll sit there or stand there and wait for something to happen, not just taking a seller sitting in front of their the fruits and vegetables or fish. I went to Arches National Park, and to get the vantage point where I got this picture, I needed to climb. And one year we went there and it was too icy, I couldn't climb. Came back a couple of years later and I was able to get it. Here I waited for somebody to walk by the wall. I like the combination of colors on the wall, the textures, the pattern, but needed somebody to walk, and waited for the right people with the right colors to walk by. I don't know them. Timing. I was waiting for things to happen. So every time I saw two balloons close together, I was moving around and waiting for another balloon to take off. Waited long time to have only one person on the steps, because there was either nobody or groups of people walking, but I wanted only one or two people, one place. I didn't want to have multiple anchor points. And I got it. This is in the MoMA Museum in New York. Timing, my little girl. When I took the picture, I didn't realize the tongue. I just wanted to capture her running, but I was lucky with the tongue. Waited a while here for the right person to walk. So I wanted somebody in front of the arrow, in the shadows there, and I wanted somebody dressed dark clothing, so it works with the shadows against the white wall. So waited for a while until I got the picture, and most of the time there were multiple people there. I didn't want multiple people there. Timing. More examples with timing. And by the way, yes, sand dunes in Death Valley, yes, it's not next door, and yes, you travel for that, but most of the pictures you've seen are local. That park with the snow is about 7 miles from my house. Waited for the sun to just hit the tops and not and really make it glow. I waited there for a while. All pictures where I had to wait for the right time. So here I was, this was taken in October last month, and I went to Mountaineer 4 times. The first time I wanted to go when there was bad weather. So the 2 pictures on top are taken from just about the same place. Here, the one on the left was a day that was stormy. You couldn't see anything beyond, as you can see, just the first line of trees, and then into the fog. You couldn't see the mountain. Let's see. The picture on, I'm just looking for the mute. The picture on the right was taken a few days later when it was clear. I went back and took the picture. Both are reflection lakes. The pictures at the bottom, I went one day for sunset. So again, time was different. It was not a completely clear day, but it was around sunset. The other ones were taken almost midday. And the picture on the right was taken the same day as the one on the left, but just after sunset. So once again, time gives you different tones, different lens. When you do landscapes, it gives you a totally different pictures. All Mount Rainier, I went there 4 times within a 2-week period that I was in Tacoma, Washington, and got very different pictures. This was just for a few moments. It was stormy, there was a little crack in the clouds, and sun rays came through Glacier National Park. This one is right near New Glarus, Wisconsin. I was there last month and went before sunrise, and I found that spot and waited for the colors just before the sun came up, and got that nice the tones moving from blue to magenta in the sky. The next one is the frame. So when we do photography, we have frames. That's what composition is all about, right? There's no composition if there is no frame. It's not the way people see the world, but it's the way we do. And the composition affects the dynamics, the impact, the mood. You know, you can read a lot about how leading lines are important, how vertical lines and horizontal lines and diagonal lines create different moods in a picture. So these are more of our visual tools to create our own expression. And I know when you put pictures in competitions, there are, you know, people love leading lines. And I often see leading lines that lead to nothing. And I say, you know, either you have something along the way or something at the end, but just a leading line that leads me to nothing, that doesn't make a great picture. Think about what to include and what to leave out. So, you know, people like to call it border patrol. You go around your border, the borders of your image, and decide this should be in or this should be out. Since I've shot slides for many years, and of course, then you have to try to get everything done right in camera because it was a pain to do cropping later. But with digital, with the high megapixel cameras today, I like to shoot wider than what I really need, just a little bit wider, so I can straighten keystoning, I can clone areas. Just gives you, or crop it for different aspect ratios depending on how I want to frame the picture, if I do want to print it. Consider the orientation, vertical or horizontal, and really the placement of the horizon. And they say normally the center is not the best place. You want either above and then it shows distance, or you put below and it shows expanse, volume. Use leading lines, use bright areas to get the attention, or high contrast areas really get more attention, sharp areas get more attention, and consider the rule of thirds, but you don't, you know, consider it. I'm not saying follow it all the times. I like to call it not a rule, but I call them guidelines. They're tools more than rules. So the rule of thirds, that's what it is. And the intersection points are the ones that create the most comfortable pictures, but it's okay to break the rules. So examples of following the rules, you can see in these pictures, placing the main subject not in the center, creating diagonal lines, creating a more dynamic composition. Sometimes you want to create more tension and you move the subject closer to the borders, and that's okay. Like in this picture, I kept my dog low in the frame because I wanted there just to be an anchor point, but really the eye to go to the interesting snow here. Again, the use of leading lines, using of foreground elements, middle ground, and background are important. But then there are times to break the rules. If you want to create some tension, make something that really makes it more yours. So the picture on the left, I made it very symmetrical because I wanted the tilted trunk of the tree to kind of create that tension. So I felt that that made it dynamic enough. At the bottom, the picture at the bottom, I saw this woman next to the four faces on the doors to the cathedral. And the way the light fell on her, I knew that will pull enough attention. So I composed it that way. And here again, it was really, I was first attracted to the four nuns. And then I saw the old man standing there and I kind of took that. And I have a bunch of pictures where I actually cut a person in half intentionally. I posted that on a website years ago and I asked for a title. The one I liked the most, the best was somebody said, An Old Man and Four Bad Habits. Breaking the rules. Here I went for a square and centered, made it more static, but I thought there is enough dynamics with the shape. Another one where it's sort of centered, but I thought it worked well for that picture. So in general, and we start evaluating what's a good picture and, you know, what is the picture for? What's the purpose? The picture that you want to put on the wall in the living room is probably not the same picture that you want to create high impact and tell a story. If you look at the two pictures on the screen right now, the picture on the left, yes, I would probably frame and put in a wall. The picture on the right, I probably won't, but to me, the one on the right tells a story. It was taken in a market in Jerusalem. The mother left the kid to sit there. She went into the store. I intentionally kept the dirt and people here. So people were just walking by and the kid was just sitting there and staring, waiting for his mother. It tells a story. It's not, I like the picture. It's not one I would hang on my wall. Pictures for greeting cards are different. Fine art, and I'll talk briefly about fine art photography, which is a lot of those pictures that you'll see in museums and high-end galleries and all that will score the lowest scores possible in a camera club competition. And I'll show a few examples a little later. But there are different ways of telling stories, of expressing yourself, and it's not by following the camera club aesthetics. Pictures for documentary are different, or pictures that go into contests depending on the venue. Pictures that went to outdoor photographer were very different from the pictures that go to some other magazines. What's the subject matter? Is the picture aesthetically pleasant to look at? Does it tell a story? I took the judges course that PSA offers. And there were slides, there were some PowerPoint presentations and then some discussions. And everything that was presented, I agreed with. But at the end of it, I said, you know, I agree with everything, but one thing is missing. And to me, it's very important. And it's content. Is it interesting? I said the way we see a lot of the judges do their job in camera clubs is they look at for what's wrong with the picture, look at the composition, look at focus, look at exposure, look at all those things, and totally ignore, is the picture interesting? Is it engaging? Does it tell me a story? Is it just pleasant to look at? I said, to me, this is like doing a book review and looking at how well the sentences are structured, looking at how fancy the words are, looking at the physical appearance of the book, the font, the cover, the whole layout. And nobody is asking, is it an interesting story? Do I want to read this book? And I think it's important when we start evaluating our photographies, is the picture interesting? Can you clearly identify the message in the picture? Is there a message? The message could be, as I said, could be an abstract, and the message is, look at how nicely some curves intersect and the patterns and the textures and all that. Does the photo evoke an emotion? And it could be just like the leaves here on top. The emotion is not by telling me a story, it's just pleasant. These are very pleasant pastel tones. And yeah, it would make me feel good just staring at a big print like that. Do the light, angle, exposure, tones, and composition enhance the story? And it's really important that the artifacts need to enhance the story rather than work against it. And in competition, I often see that people are so trying so hard to make the picture high impact, visually high impact, that they actually mess up the story. So you're in a nice park and things are pretty and calm, and you start making, raising the structure or clarity, and you make the cloud look grainy. And yeah, first look, it makes some visual impact, but it doesn't necessarily support the picture. So here's some example, and I have a whole program on fine art photography. It's really the pictures you love to hate. So these pictures that you see on the screen are, you know, I've seen them in museums. I downloaded the pictures actually from either MoMA or the Tate Museum in London or some high-end galleries. And Stephen Shore, both Stephen Shore and William Eggleston are considered pioneers of making color photography fine art. Think about these pictures on the screen. How well do you think these will do in your camera club in a competition? Very poorly, I believe. And a judge will, Stephen Shore, one of his way, actually his style, is to have a lot of elements in the frame. A little of a piece of a book, a little bit of the bed, a little bit of the bookshelf here, a little bit of the lamp. He has the phone and the card, the student card, to tell us, orient us a little bit. But do you think that this would do well in a competition? Absolutely not. The picture on top, again, we see pieces that add up to a story. That's his style. So it's not like he took a snapshot and didn't pay attention. These people teach photography, they know what they're doing. It's their style. And William Eggleston, the same thing. These are pictures that build up a story with the different elements. Their styles are actually not that far apart. But it's something different. So I want, as I start talking about rules, about things to consider, to know there are times to break the rules. There are times to develop your own way. But I can tell you, if you put it in competition, it may not necessarily work. My club is having a competition right now, and I didn't even submit because I like to do my own things. I submit periodically, but not all the time. Any questions? Okay. Composition, center of interest. What are your eyes drawn to when you look at the picture? As I mentioned, the sharpest thing, the area with the highest contrast, brightest, those will usually draw the attention. Is that where you want the viewer to start? Do you see the main subject? Do you see multiple subjects that compete with each other? I know judges don't like multiple subject or secondary subjects. Yes, in a camera club competition where pictures are displayed for a few seconds and a judge has to figure out what's going on, I understand that. But sometimes you want actually pictures that grow on the viewer, that expand, build up a story. So you may have subjects, but there must be relationship. They must support each other. Do technical aspects add or detract from the subject? So again, you want to pay attention to those. Arrangement, and that's part of the composition. Do the subject and supporting elements fill the frame? Does the composition lead you to this object? Does the arrangement of key elements enhance the image? Rick Salmon said in one of his presentations, whatever, there is nothing neutral in the frame. So everything in the frame either enhance the picture or distracts from the subject. So you really have to look at everything in the frame and see, does it support the subject? One exercise that I like sometimes to do with my pictures is, and it's not my idea, but I thought it was a smart idea, especially if you try to figure out what do I get attracted to, how do I design my pictures and stuff. You take a few pictures that you like, that you took, you write down, you take the picture, you write down, really take a pen and a piece of paper, write down everything that you see in the picture, all the elements in the picture, write them down. Then start writing down the relationships, and then the story and how it makes you feel or what it evokes. And you'll see that there would be a pattern between the pictures that you really like. There could be a totally different subjects, but you'll see that you build stories, and then you can start being more careful designing pictures the way you want and not including things that should not be there. Did the photographer break the rules creatively to add impact to the image? Is the background controlled? So again, you want the attention to be, you want to control the viewer. Not necessarily, the viewer may interpret your picture differently from what you intended, but you want to create a picture that evokes emotions, that pulls the viewer in and let them figure out how they interpret it. It could be very different from your intention, and that's okay. The viewer does not have your experience, your background, so you don't need to pass the same emotions to the viewer, but to evoke emotions, to create a composition that evokes emotions and let the viewer interpret it their way. And did the photographer use, again, the visual tools to create, to enhance the composition? The technical aspects, yeah, they need to be good. The picture needs to be sharp. What needs to be sharp? It has to have the appropriate contrast and tonal range. Again, I judge a lot. I see pictures that I think about 30 seconds in Photoshop or Lightroom or Camera Raw could have made a huge difference for the picture. Is it exposed correctly to create the mood? You see, I don't care about scientifically the correct exposure. I'm looking for the exposure that expresses the mood that you intended to. Are the colors correct? Do they fit the style or mood? When I say correct, again, to fit the style or mood. For my project, Empty Street at Night, all the pictures, with no exception, I applied color grading to give them that cinematic look. And what it did, it tied them together. So if somebody looked at a single image and said, oh, there's a little color shift here. Yes, there is a little color shift, but it created a series of pictures that tie together with consistent mood, consistent message. Is the light too harsh, too soft, too flat? I'm not against complete white areas or completely black areas. Some pictures, I do it intentionally. Painters used it as a tool to create impact. I use the same. So in my pictures, you may often see areas that are completely no texture, all white or all black, but it needs to be intentional in the right places. Is the white balance corrected for the line? And look for ways to be creative. Does the picture show details that are often missed or surprise the viewer? Are elements in the picture arranged in a way that will make the strong statement or make interesting or attractive? Is the picture interesting? And that's really an important thing. Make the pictures interesting. Somebody asked Jay Mazel, what do you do to make the pictures interesting? And he said, become an interesting person. And what that means is look beyond photography, look at other things, and enrich yourself with visual tools. An example, go to a ballet and see how the fabrics, as the dancers dance and the fabrics fly in the wind or the air when move. And you say, you know, next time I take pictures of birds flying, maybe I should use some slow shutter speed, maybe get some of those nice moving lines. Or so you can become more interesting by looking at other arts. I look a lot at paintings. I definitely look at other forms of art, again, to enrich my set of tools, my visual tools. Common processing problems. And these are all things that I see almost in every competition that I judge. Living dust spots. I don't know, these are so easy to fix, why we see so many of them. One of the things, people don't necessarily see them, and then when they get projected or they move to another monitor that has a little higher contrast, suddenly they all appear. What I do with my pictures, if I have blue sky, I have a smooth background, I'll take the levels, I'll go to the levels adjustment layer and move the right slider a little bit towards the middle and the middle slider a little bit towards the right, and I create high contrast, and suddenly all the dust spots appear. And then I just go to the layer below and I fix everything so I can still see it. And when I'm done, I delete the adjustment layer. You can also in Lightroom and Camera Raw actually reveal the dust spots. But the technique that I just mentioned also works to see if you messed up by cloning or healing or any, you know, fixing that you've done by creating that higher contrast. Suddenly you see that your cloning is not as clean as you thought it was. Oversaturation, over-sharpening, unrealistic HDR, grungy sky. I see that a lot. People want to give the picture a pop and they make it all pop, but the clouds need to be smooth. Clouds should not be grungy. The sky should be smooth. Bad sky replacements, I'll show you a few examples. Inconsistent lighting, perspective and angle, and halos. We see a lot in sky replacement, especially now, the tools, Photoshop on one, Luminar, they have AI-based sky replacements. They do a great job on the technical side, but you can mess it up by having the wrong sky or by controlling the meeting area, the edges inappropriately. Bad content replacement, I see quite a bit of that, and very often poorly converted black and white images. Either because, in most cases, poorly converted, just the conversion keeps the black and white flat, but often just the wrong choice for black and white. Not every picture that is great in color makes a good black and white picture. A few examples of bad sky replacement. So I just created those. So yeah, technically it's done perfectly, but the sky doesn't match the foreground. And yes, Photoshop will try to make the foreground match and all that, but no, the foreground was taken on a hazy day. Everything was sort of blue and the sky was pretty much white. And I like the picture the way it was, just for the demo today. I put the wrong sky in it. I see that often. People don't realize that the sky above you, looking up, looks very differently from the sky around the horizon. And this is an example, and I see those where people take beautiful sky, but not from the right, not the right angle, not the right perspective. If you take the sky, if your landscape is taken with a very wide angle lens, the sky has to be taken with a wide angle lens, otherwise it doesn't fit. You see the clouds don't look natural here, also because they're taken from a higher, at a higher angle. This is one of the pictures, by the way, that I took. As I mentioned, every day I stopped a few times and took pictures from the middle of the road. The sky here looks a lot better, taken with a wide angle lens, better color match, the lighting matches, the direction of the light matches. So again, this is not the original sky, I just created that example. Here, it looks almost right. But if you look at the direction of the light on the barn came from the right, from behind me, but to the right. The light on the clouds came from the left. So when you look at this picture, something doesn't fit. And it may not be easy to put your finger on it, but if you really study it, you realize the light direction is not the same. Again, technically, the sky replacement was done perfectly, but it's the wrong sky for this picture. The light doesn't match. Once again, the direction of the light. Devil's Tower was lit from the right, the clouds are lit from the left. Doesn't work. At first glance, it looks nice, but doesn't fit. Once again, skies that the color doesn't match the lighting on the foreground. Here again, wrong light, wrong sky for this landscape. So a few thoughts, and as you can see, they're not my thoughts, but I love to share these. And I mentioned David Duchamp, The Soul of the Camera. I think it's one of the best books I've read about photography. Shoot what it feels like, not what it looks like. Show your own interpretation. Make the photograph about something, not of something. You do that by making your interpretation, using the visual tools and language. I mentioned them, you have them listed on at the bottom here. Without the interpretation, the picture is a Me Too photograph that we see again and again and again. It's not the sharpness, I love that statement. It's not the sharpness of the image which people will respond. They will not one day in the distant future speak about your stunning histogram. You know, I belong to a bunch of photography discussion groups, and sometimes what amazes me, people start talking about how critical it is to shoot either Adobe RGB or Pro Photo in 16 bits, not 8 bits or 32 bits and all that. And I'm thinking some of their pictures, I wouldn't even care for them with any tonal depth or color space, or it's really, I mean, we as photographers, we know these things and we maybe pay attention to some of them, but the reality is the pictures we love of Ansel Adams, look at them closely, they're not the same quality of what we get with our cell phones today. If we talk about the technical aspects, the histograms, those things, I don't want to put down his work. I'm just saying we love his work, not because it was technically perfect. Brooke Jensen from Landsworth says it's all about content, content, and content. He always said it's 3 times. It's really, does the picture engage? Does it tell a story? Is there anything that we want to keep looking at it? So summary, evaluate the picture to see that it's technically good, because it does have to be good. If the picture is not good, and the level of good would vary, because you know, I love to do street photography, and I can tell you, street photography, the pictures are not perfect from a technical point of view or composition, because you don't control everything. But there could be very strong story impact, emotional impact. So you need, could be great light. So you do need to look for what's beyond just the technical aspects. And unfortunately, when we look at camera club competitions, for the most part, it's about technical aspects and composition. It's the artifacts, not so much the content of the picture. And I got this idea from Brooke Jensen from Landsworth. Usually the picture needs to have at least 3 of those things to get a high score. Clear subject and center of interest, tells a story, special lighting, strong graphics, element of surprise, emotive, strong composition, unique and creative presentation. So if you have 1 of them, it's probably not good enough. You have 2 of them, it's usually a good picture. If you have 3 of them, usually it's a really good picture. And I tested that on many of my pictures, and I do believe that this is a true statement. And the last thing is beware of the illusion of reality. And what that is, the viewer doesn't care about what the viewer doesn't see. They don't see how hard it was for you to get the picture. They don't see how much you love that person. They don't see how much you paid to get that picture. And I judge the competition. I judged the competition. It was a portrait of a bear behind a bush, so you could see the head of the bear behind the bush. It was done well, and I gave it a 7 on a score on a range of 5 to 9. So it was not one of the top awards. It got a 7, which meant it was done well, but that's it. And the maker came to me after and said, I can't believe you gave it only a 7. I went to this farm, that place in, I forget, the West Coast somewhere. I don't remember if it was Oregon or Washington, and where they tame these animals, and she took it there and took that special trip and all that. And I said to her, you know, by looking at the picture, I couldn't tell, and I didn't really care if it was taken in the Bronx Zoo or there. It was a good headshot of a bear behind a bush, but this was it. So your reality didn't really make any difference to me. And sometimes because something took us a great effort to make doesn't make it a great pictures for others to look at. One thing that I created for a good number of years, I judged our local 4-H annual competitions for the contest. And I would get between 200 to 300 pictures, and they wanted comments. And it was not done with the makers in the room. I was in a room with all their prints, and I said, I'm not going to write 300 comment text. So I put that little chart, and pretty much the phrases that I would say when I judge a competition. And then on some of them, I would just go agree or disagree. And this gave me kind of an easy way. So each, actually, they put a blank form like that on every print. And all I had to do is take a pen and check a few of the boxes, not all of them, but just a few of them. So the person could see if they have a good composition, or technically it's good, or it tells a good story, or so just an idea to start judging the work. So, any questions? I'm done with the presentation part, but what I do here, and we can do it as long as you guys want to stay around, is look at some pictures and let you take a shot at analyzing. So if you're interested to do it, we can go into it. And I can tell you, I put pictures that I like more and some that I like less, and but with the full intention of you being honest and trying to evaluate it. Guys, it's time to unmute.
Steve here. Any questions from anyone before we go on onto this picture evaluation? If not, my first reaction to this picture is that seeing the sky on the top is distracting. Otherwise I like it. Otherwise, it's wonderful.
Anybody else?
I like the timing of getting it with the fog in there and the lighting the way it is. Beautiful scene.
Okay. So here, the first view, I actually have both versions. Look at the difference. No, nothing is moving here, sorry. Look at the difference. Without the sky, without the sky and without the bright, really bright area here.
Wow.
Those little things make a big difference. So when you judge your own work or somebody else's, pay attention to those. What do you think about this picture?
It's kind of run of the mill. Good color, but what's the subject?
I don't like the foreground.
Okay, anybody else?
Kind of boring.
Good, exactly. It's nice colors, nice light. It ended there. It's a straight shot, so there's no angle. It's very static. The branches here are not adding. So as I said, you look around the frame. Is it doing anything? It doesn't work as a real anchor point. It's actually a distraction. The foreground, yes, nice reflection, but it's too far separated from the rest of it. Absolutely, I agree with all the comments here. What about this one?
More dynamic.
Right. But
Nice leading line, but kind of a weird foreground in the right bottom.
yes, and look, about a third of the frame doesn't add anything, right? All that area is kind of dirty, boring, dark. So yes, you have the dynamic line, you have the leading line and all that, but still not a great picture. I mean, if I cropped it about here, and I could have done, and by the way, of course, I took many pictures and I could have done different things, but what I'm showing you is stuff that I intended. What about this one?
Don't care for the cropping at her forehead at the top and too much on the bottom.
Okay, good point. I don't mind the bottom, but when you photograph people, you can crop the top of the head, but not the middle of the forehead, because it looks weird. It looks like she has a really big forehead. This is the picture, and look at the difference. Look at the difference.
Mhm.
I use two lights and the sun behind her. I use off-camera flashes with umbrellas and stuff to light her. And I did crop it this way intentionally, but the other one I just cropped for the program. What about this one?
Sweet.
I think the perspective is off. The point.
Yeah, you're not interacting with the dog. You're just looking down at it.
Yeah, remember I said for animals and people, usually you want to be at their eye level. Look at the difference.
Mhm.
She goes with me everywhere.
Nicely posed on the log there. It's impressive.
Yeah, I can walk her in the park loose, and she's the only thing she chases are squirrels today. And now in the fall, sorry, there's so many nuts. She chases squirrels. That's why she's in good shape. She's 9. What about this one?
I love it.
I like the colors.
Okay, start looking for problems.
The big white patch at the bottom is somewhat distracting. It keeps pulling the eye away from the pretty yellows.
Okay,
I'm trying to figure out the subject. I love the texture, love the colors.
you see, this is, and you just nailed it. There are different areas of sharp focus, so your eyes is looking for a subject. It's kind of messy. Yeah, there is a main thing here, but it's sharp here, it's sharp here, it's sharp here, and kind of there is really no the composition is just not supporting it. Look at the difference with this one, where you do have a very sharp area, tiny area that really can hold your interest. What do you think about this one?
I would crop out some on the right.
Okay,
I like it the way it is.
yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, I wanted to keep that thing here, but I can see maybe even a square frame would work for this one. What about this one?
Too busy on the left.
Yeah, the people on the left draw your attention away from the subject.
But you know, that's where the story is.
How so?
It's not clear.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, so I put these pictures, I mean, that late night, empty street at night, I put these pictures into books, and you really, when you put a collection of images, you want, whether it's an exhibit or a book or a slideshow, you want to put some text that really orient the viewer to what it is. She actually, it looked like she had a little fight with her, or argument with her friends, and she sat on this side of the sidewalk, and the other friends did their own things. I asked her, it was at 1 a.m. and I asked her if I can take a few pictures, and she agreed. And but again, this is the picture that tells a story. It's not a picture for your living room. It's a little bit kind of one woman sitting there by herself, and then you have a group of people doing some more activity. What about this one?
When you had that picture cropped differently so that it was that long leading line without
Hold on, are you talking about this one or the previous one?
the previous one. I thought that, I think earlier you showed that crop differently. So you had a long leading line going down the street, but not
No, it was the same.
No,
The picture, at this point, I'm not sure because I took a bunch. So
yeah, I thought it looked differently the first time I saw this image. And to me, the story was she looked like a hooker.
oh no.
No, well, actually, I thought that was quite reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she was there. As I say, it was the last Thursday of the summer break, and a lot of the kids were out there, and some of her friends were sitting right behind that group of.
Okay.
But you see, the illusion of reality, because I know how it evolved. You, as the viewer, you have no idea, and I have to watch for that unless I put it in the story. What about this one?
Subject is not interesting.
The light is confusing.
Okay. Well, that's not a picture for competition for exactly the reasons you just mentioned. But for the empty street at night, actually, I found it kind of a moody. The whole book, the whole collection is about empty street, all play of light and shadows, and all mundane subjects. But yes, this picture I would never put into a camera club competition. But I just like the way the light was on a few spots here. I use for the whole thing, I didn't use flash or any other source of lighting other than what was there. What about this one?
It's a nice snapshot.
I like it.
And this is what it was. I was sitting on my chair. My wife was sitting there, and the two dogs. This is on the right. It's my dog. On the left, it's my son's dog. And the way the two of them just went. So I said to my wife, "Hey, look at me!" And I took the picture of all. It tells a story. It's technically done pretty well, but these are the type of pictures that you'll see in exhibits that are not about, hey, this is a picture to hang on your wall, but pictures that tell a story, tell a family story, or really capture a moment. What about this one?
Kind of a trade angle of view.
What did you say?
A trite angle of view.
Okay. To me, this is just a boring picture. Technically, it's done really well, but boring.
I'd agree. I mean, it's just a round circle in the big sky. That doesn't even have interesting clouds.
Yeah. One of the things, and that's not included in this program, is I shoot skies, I shoot textures, and I shoot objects that I can later use in other pictures. So I have inventory of skies, textures, and objects. So on their own, they're not important. What about this one?
It's lovely.
I love it.
Yeah, it's very pretty.
I do too.
Yeah, I put this one in a competition. What the judge didn't like. Okay, so I like to work with selective depth of field. And today, again, the technical judges, you should have used focus stacking. No, that would ruin the whole picture. I like the soft lines and curves and all that. So focus, it's not about the flower. It's about shapes and curves and all that. The one thing I did agree, that dark area, bottom left, is not helping. And I could have done something about it. What about this one?
I like that a lot.
Me
I
too.
love detail of the dew or water, whatever it is, the composition, the fading to the background, everything about it I like a lot.
Yeah, what the judge didn't like about this one was that here it wasn't sharp.
I don't know that that's necessary, frankly, because the rest of it is, and it's blending right nicely into a non-sharp space to me.
Yeah, obviously I put it into a competition. It didn't do terribly, but it didn't get like a top award, the top score. But I like the picture. I like the way the foreground plays with the background. It is a setup, so I had them all arranged. I bought a bunch in the supermarket, and I put one in the front and a few in the back, and I sprayed them. So it's a setup, but okay. Okay, I'll show you a few that I actually I judged the competition of another club. I'm not going to mention what state, what side of the country. And I was a little surprised with some of the pictures that I saw, but let me use a few of them. Obviously, the makers submitted it to a competition.
Composition is fine, but it's uninteresting overall, flat.
Yeah,
The object on the horizon is distracting. from
yeah, I
the
found
surfer.
this was one of my comments, that the objects on the horizon, but also I said, at this point, the surfer is so small, and then you have this person here. I was mostly attracted to the textures in the bottom part of the picture right here. That could have been a beautiful picture, but if they wanted it about the surfer here, it should have been much tighter on the surfer. Yep. What about this one?
I think that's really fun.
Like the curves.
The attitude and the contrast of the lightness and darkness.
Start looking for problems.
Well, the people's heads in the bottom left.
The bottom right was a little distracting in the corner. The line.
What about some technical issues or?
There's a lot of
We're
haloing
on
in the
Zoom, so I
lower
don't know
left.
what. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
There's a lot of haloing in the lower left.
Yeah, there was sky replacement, obviously. So there are halos around all the edges, and the lighting doesn't match at all. The sky and the light on the foreground are very different.
Yeah.
And
But I think that's what works about this picture, is it just is something that captures your attention because it's quite contrasty.
right, but then technically you see the problems of all the halos. Not to mention you see, like, I don't know if you can see like hot pixels.
Yep.
And look here, cloning on the left side, the top of the screen on the left. Do you see cloning artifacts?
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are the things that were
Yeah.
said. By taking the level slide, the levels adjustment layer, and moving the center slider to the right, the left, the right slider a little bit to the left, all those things will immediately appear very clearly. What about this one?
Sky looks weird.
Yeah. It looks like, again, sky replacement that was done poorly, because you see the halos around all the objects. And I can tell you, I have a good collection of skies. The first thing I do after I crop to keep the sky to put in my collection, I remove all dust spots. Look how many dust spots. And
Yeah.
I remove noise. And but then also, what's the subject here? What are the elements that actually support the picture besides nice light on the foreground?
bottom left or bottom right is distracting, whatever that is in the
Yeah, and
corner.
I know why they wanted to keep it so they don't have to crop out. Now, what I do, I would content aware fill it if there was more in the picture to even spend the time on it. But this was submitted to a competition.
Huh.
What about this one?
I like it.
I like it.
I think it's great.
Okay, now start looking carefully.
Well, I think the reflection has been put in there. It appears just there's something weird about the white color on the sides and around that reflection that doesn't mimic. I don't know. For me, it looks like it's
There's horrible look, there is some horrible cloning here. The reflection and the top don't match.
Yeah, they don't match.
Yeah.
They added, they did some creative cloning.
Yeah, and it's very noisy and some other technical issues, but if you start looking closely, it was, and you guys are on Zoom, so you probably don't see all the details that I am seeing, but okay, what about this one? We're back to my pictures, but as I said, I put pictures that I know have some issues.
Own highlights.
One,
Not sure what the subject
yeah,
is.
it's boring. There is really nothing that, now I took it because it's a famous cemetery in New Orleans, but this was one of my record shots. I took some more creative shots, but this was just kind of a record shot, but it was bad light. I mean, not the appropriate light for this type of a scene. And it's boring. There's no one subject that stands out. What about this one?
I like it.
This is one that I put in one competition and the judge gave it the lowest score and said, too bad the weather didn't work for you. And I put it again and it got the top score, got first place. Yeah, I went there a bunch of times. It's in Maine and never had the same light and fog the way I wanted it. What about this one?
The foreground looks distracting on the bottom left and bottom.
Yeah, the bottom third doesn't do anything for the picture.
Yeah.
And even the sky is not that interesting. So yeah, the center is interesting. Maybe should be a panel, you know, kind of a panel shot. But the bottom and the top are really not doing anything.
No, and if they were going to have it that way, then they think there needs to be much more clarity with the bridge or whatever that is. I can't quite tell on my
Right.
There's just
Absolutely.
darkened out so you don't have any of the shadows and things like that in it.
Yep. Absolutely correct. I
That
agree.
little black dot out there, is it somebody swimming?
No, it's probably a buoy or some. I mean,
Charlie Brown swimming.
if
Yeah.
no, there was nobody in the water. Okay, this one is a little bit more challenging.
I've seen this image before someplace.
It's mine, so I hope you didn't. But
But I love the way the light shines off of the little spikes on the cactus. I just like that a lot. I think though that this picture, the whole picture could be the upper left corner.
yeah, you see, this is a picture that I won't put in a competition because there is no clear subject or something. But as a print on the wall, it would actually work because it's something that, especially if you pass it many times, it keeps growing on you. But yeah, in terms of the composition, I was attracted to the light, and I took others where I have much better compositions, but I wanted to use this one as an example. What about this one?
Seen one waterfall, you've seen them all.
Well, you know, a lot of times that's true, but there are some pretty amazing waterfall shots. This one doesn't, something's not right. I don't know what it is, but
I'd
I can
like-
tell you what it is. It's boring.
Yeah.
I love to shoot waterfalls, and I try to create a composition with the tree kind of framing it, but the light was so flat, which usually works for waterfalls, for running water. You don't want bright light, but everything got so flat and debris. When you shoot waterfalls or cascades, you don't want a lot of debris. It's very distracting. But more importantly, I think because the waterfall is pretty flat, if I had more of what's happening here, you know, the area here, it would have been more interesting where you have the different layers. But for the most part, it's just flat, not very interesting. So technically it's done well, but it just not the right light, not the right waterfall. Probably I could have done something a little differently. I've been there other times with more water and stuff and got much better pictures. But this one is simply boring.
yeah. I like this shot, except the line in front of the dog's nose is kind of right up against his nose.
Okay.
It's distracting to see the, because the dog seems to be the subject, but whatever
Yes,
in front of his nose is kind of distracting.
too busy.
Yep, I think it's too busy too. The dog doesn't stand out enough from the background.
Yeah. Think about if it was framed just above the ears and with the wheel, it would have taken, you see how I move my cursor? Could have been so much better without all the whites. Remember, eye goes to high contrast areas. So the eye keeps going to the areas that distract you from the subject. I haven't noticed the nose thing, but you're absolutely correct. But the picture should have been just much tighter and could still tell the story. It was in the Amish country near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I took it quickly, and the way I framed it for this, yeah. What about this one?
That's very interesting. Very good.
Like the subject.
Yeah, this one actually did really well in competitions. It's in Chinatown, New York, taken with an infrared camera.
An infrared.
Yeah,
How come you used an infrared camera?
because that's what I had on me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When I go to New York or Philadelphia, well, I haven't been to New York much since COVID. I've been there only once, but I used to go to New York a lot. I do photography workshops there, and I go to Chinatown. And because I'm only an hour from New York, when I go there, I take one camera with one lens, and I can concentrate on one type of picture. So sometimes I'll go with a very wide angle lens, and sometimes I'll go with a short telephoto lens, or with my 50mm 1.8, and really concentrate on shallow depth of field. So I try to do, because I'm close enough, I'll try to do one thing. On that trip, one time I only went with my fisheye lens, but on this visit, I just took my infrared camera.
What would an infrared, I guess I'm not familiar with what kind of pictures an infrared takes. How would that differ from like your 50mm, for example?
Infrared will make, okay, so infrared will make any green vegetation, not green subjects, vegetation, they reflect infrared light, and it will make them bright. I'll show a few pictures later. I'm almost done with this.
Okay.
because I have a whole program on infrared photography. But what it does, what's nice about infrared is that it produces the best pictures actually midday with bright sunlight, because it reflects the most infrared light and you get the effect of the infrared. So when it's not the best time to shoot with regular cameras, it's the best time to shoot with the infrared. On my trip here, the long trip that I just did with my dog, I shot both infrared and standard. Yeah, and this one I'll cut in a couple of pictures because it can go for another hour like that. So here, of course, what's distracting is the out of focus leaf here. If it was further away, it would be okay, but here it's just too close. Yeah, so yeah, this one I thought was good, and what somebody said to me in one of the critiques was they wish they could see more of what the kid is putting in his mouth, her mouth. Let me see. I do like high keys. I'll just go quickly through some. One thing that sometimes judges say, and I don't necessarily agree, is, oh, this is somebody else's art. No, this is somebody else's art, but the rust and everything else is not. So the composition is mine. I do shoot a lot of murals and other people's art, as long as I do something that is mine. Let me just see. Okay, that's it for that. But let me just quickly, just to show you. Where's my infrared?
What company do you use for publishing your books?
Oh, I do it myself. So I do mostly PDFs. So you see the difference, the same scene, infrared and standard. So all the vegetation, the green stuff becomes like white.
Oh, okay. That's it turns it almost to black and white.
You see?
Does the infrared also take pictures in the dark?
No, no. So this is near infrared. There is far deep infrared that for we're looking. So 700 is about where your visibility around here. My filter is 720, so it takes some visible light and some infrared. That's why I can get some colors in my pictures. But this is not the deep infrared that is used for surveillance. So I don't see in the dark. I don't see, you see how it makes everything stand out?
Yeah.
Now I painted the red back into it. The mill is red, but I had to, because it doesn't produce those type of colors. So yeah, so this is what infrared does. I have 2 cameras converted, and I just like the effect. Very different.
I do too. I like the effect.
Yeah. So, and what it does to people, it makes the skin look really smooth.
Wow.
This is without doing any photoshopping this is my wife, without putting any photoshopping to smooth the skin. Now, this one was taken in Times Square in New York in the middle of the day. The infrared sees through the body paint.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they're standing there in Times Square and nobody sees that because the body paint really reflects the light, the regular light, but not the infrared. And I didn't realize that until I came home.
But they're glad that you didn't know that or that, you know.
No, if I knew that, I would be in New York right away. But yeah, yeah, it's kind of an interesting effect. So I have two cameras converted, one point and shoot and one a Nikon DSLR. Makes for something different.
I thought it was all black and white that you were doing, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so
How do you get a camera converted?
so there are a few places that convert them. I used Live Pixel. They are in West Coast. I don't remember if Washington or Oregon. I think Washington. But the funny thing is, one of the best places now is in Raritan, New Jersey, which is 3 miles from my home. But I got my cameras converted in the West Coast simply because at the time they were considered the best. It's not inexpensive, so it did cost me $250 to $300 a camera to convert. And you don't want to take, I took cameras that I knew I'm not going to use as standard cameras anymore because I upgraded to newer things. But you don't want to take a really old camera because you want to have a good sensor. You don't want to get a lot of noise, and so, but it's kind of fun to use it. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop sharing. And if there are any other questions, I'll be glad to.
Other questions, anybody? This has been great, Arik. Thank you so much. Lots for all of us to think about with our own images and our own photography going forward.
Yeah, the one thing I strongly recommend to the camera clubs is, you know, by doing the PSA stuff and doing the standard camera club judging, and as I said, I have all presentation on fine art photography because if you go to a museum, you're not going to see a pretty picture of a flower. You're not going to see a portrait of an animal or a bird. You're not even going to see an eagle with a fish in its claws. The stuff that will get the highest score in the camera club competition. What you're going to see is how photographers use, it's not about the subject, but what the subject represents. And it really, these pictures don't necessarily follow the rules of camera clubs. And it's not just fine art. You look at some street photographers and you see that the pictures with very high impact, if you start looking at, you know, glare from a flash or even from a lighting in a club, in a nightclub, or a judge in a camera club will immediately put it down, but the pictures tell stories and have really strong emotional visual impact. And sometimes we need to really concentrate on that. On my trip, and I've done already a number of long trips with my dog. And the dog is a great thing for street photography because you don't look creepy when you approach people, when you come with a beagle. And also people come to you to start talking. So it's actually, and then say, oh, we talk, and then would you mind if I take your picture? I really like this. You always have to tell them why them. And you know, I took many pictures of people on my trips in the national parks. I'll stop and talk to people. Because of the dog, I couldn't go on trails, so I could only be in the parking areas or some small trails that I was on, but and I would talk to people. And in small towns. I love stopping in small towns. That's why in Wisconsin I get to places that no other tourist ever visit. Mount Vernon. Do you know where it is?
Mhm.
Really stopped in tiny towns there. I went from Edison to Monroe and all the side roads around that area.
Other questions or thoughts from anybody? I think we'll be done then. Thank you so much, Arik, again.
You're
So
very welcome. And good night.
good discussions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.